Hello everyone, my name is Michael and I am speaking to you from the verse. Now if you're not sure what the verse is, I encourage you to go to my website at rewritingtheverse.com, and there you can check out all the information about the verse, including lots of updates, video and written. All of the YouTube channel videos are on there, so I encourage you to go check that out. Now I am a past life regressionist and rewriter, and what that means is that once I'm able to see the points in a timeline that need to be worked on, I'm able to, with guidance, go back in and rewrite the timeline so that it has a higher level outcome. And if you're interested in any kind of services like that on an individual level or a group level, go to the website rewritingtheverse.com, and there you can see all the different types of services I offer. So this video is specific to the upcoming 1/24/2020 new moon. What I have found over the last several months is that the twin flames, divine masculine and divine feminine, have a huge part in helping lift our vibration through the Ascension portals and major astrological dates and times. This upcoming new moon being one of those. And what I have chosen to do that seemed to be making a big difference and showing some interest for people on here is doing past lives specific to a twin flame journey. I basically ask my guides whatever twin flame story needs to be explored and healed that would be the most powerful to get us through this next energetic portal, or this next energetic this new moon coming up specifically for this video. And so that is what I did tonight. Today is the 20th of January 2020, and I am going to share with you the details about that past life regression, and then at the end I will do a live rewrite. I have already looked and seen where the best place would be to intervene. However, I did not put that in place yet because I do feel it has a lot of power in being able to show you in real time it going into place. And so that's kind of the big shebang at the end that you can wait for. And then it will be finalized, and that will be the new timeline. And it will shift certainly the twin flame and divine masculine, divine feminine journeys. But since I believe all of us are parts of that journey, we are all twin flames, all either divine masculine, divine feminine, that means this impacts everybody. And so, so either way, whether you believe it or not, you're going to benefit from this. So, see if there's anything else to really share before I get started in sharing what the past life, how it unfolded for me tonight. I think that might be the highlights. Guess we'll get started, and if there's more to add outside of that, they'll tell me. All right? So the first thing I do when I look at a past life timeline is I ask how far back in time we're looking at. And this one occurred approximately 500 AD, so 1500 years ago. And then I ask, especially when they start to show me the first images, what part of the world we're looking at, or what culture. And they showed me somewhere in what is now Canada, maybe in the northern parts of Alberta, or somewhere more central but northern in Canada. So this is where it's taking place. And so, not surprising, there's a lot of snow. The very first image they showed me, it was twilight, getting dark, and all I could see was, I was looking towards some sort of mountains where it was silhouetted and the sun's going down. I can definitely tell though that there's snow. It's definitely cold. The person's wearing, furs, things like that. And there's no moon that's visible anyway. And what they told me is this is approximately the time of basically the same new moon that we're going to experience in a few days. The vibration specific to this new moon this is basically like a replica of what was happening 1500 years ago. So it was a new moon time period then as well. So this is one of the reasons why it's linked to this particular time. Okay, so it was kind of hard to see because it was getting pretty much dark, but there was a small fire, and there were 4 men sitting around it. And then the person, it was hard to tell if it was a man or a woman because I couldn't, they were covered in furs and wasn't really clear who they were, what gender they were. But ultimately I see the 4 men sitting around. They're in a pretty good mood because apparently they had a big kill that day. This was a hunting party. So the 4 men are sitting there, and the person that I'm seeing in this body is actually over on the side working on a hide. It's either a really large deer or it's an elk. One of the two. It was a pretty good size hide that they had killed that day. And it turns out it is a woman. So we'll just go ahead and reveal that now so we have that idea. It is a woman, a young woman. She's about 20 years old. And she is actually, even though they're sitting around the fire, having clearly not really worked at all for a while, probably since, well, what they're telling me as this is going along, she was doing all the work of cleaning the hide, the carcass, all of that, getting all the meat off of it. She was the one doing all of that. They pretty much, the moment they dragged it back from wherever they were, she took it from there and did everything. And if it wasn't elk, even a large deer, that's a lot of work. But this is what she did. That's actually what I was told. That's what she was there for. Being a woman, she wasn't part of the hunt itself, but hey, they wanted somebody to cook, clean, take care of the, processing of the meat when they finally got something. Pretty much everything other than hunting, that was her job. And they pretty much sat around and let her take care of all of that. So, but what I was told is she preferred to be out on these hunting trips rather than be back with a larger group, and I'll describe that in a few minutes as to why. So that was her role in being there. And it was the same day as the kill, and by the next day, they would ultimately carry all the meat and go back to the main camp where everybody else was. All right. So basically the next day I see them carrying the meat, and just because she's a woman doesn't necessarily give her a lighter load. In fact, I think she was pretty much carrying maybe the heaviest part. It was clear, even at this point, that the women did most of the work. And so they're taking the meat back to the main camp, and what I see is a semi-permanent camp. There's little shelters set up and one main fire, and there's a lot of men. I'm not an expert in like Native American kind of history and how they ran their societies, but my understanding, what I was told, is that this was they weren't the only one of their kind, but it was a different type of lifestyle for this group of people. And this was not a typical arrangement of living. So what I saw was approximately 20 men were a part of this bigger group. And, or hold on, 20 people. So that included 4 women. So I guess that's 16 total men. So approximately 20 people. And so there's 4 women currently in this group, and that includes her, and then overall the other 16 men. All of the men were fairly young. I'm going to say in their 20s for the most part. None of them married. This was not a group that was focused on what so many other tribes and groups were intent on, which is basically having families and maybe growing your tribe and it being a family experience. Oh no, I was told it was almost like if you envision maybe what pirates would be, that weren't on a ship somewhere, but were inland in snow. That basically these were young men that didn't necessarily fit into society, that weren't necessarily looking or able to become chiefs of their own. So they're kind of like, they don't really have a whole lot of other places to go. So they kind of run around in packs and do their own thing and steal young women to take care of them, basically, in every way. They keep the numbers low, though. They don't want too many women. This is not meant to be, like I said, a family thing. It is purely, still young women. They're meant to cook, clean, do your underwear, and yes, for sex. I mean, pretty much everything. They were slaves. From the moment those women were taken and brought back to the camp, they were slaves. And again, they purposely didn't want too many of them, just enough to take care of their needs, and that's otherwise they were seen as dead weight. The women were just property, and there was no, this group of men and people were not in any way, shape, or form in love. This was purely a bunch of young men doing what they want to do, and had their slave women with them. And this is how they lived. They'd stay in an area long enough to kind of deplete the resources of maybe the larger game and whatever it is that they found attractive in that area. And the moment that was done, they'll pack up and moved on to some other place. And yes, along the way, if they ran across a group of, another tribe or something, and they liked what they saw, they'd either steal it or steal some of the young women. This was the lifestyle that this woman was living in. Now, she's 20 at this point, but she was abducted at 14 years old, is my understanding. They came in at some point into her little village, ransacked it, killed a lot of people, raped her, but liked her enough to want to take her in as one of their slaves. And that's how she came into this situation. So for 6 years, she's been a part of this. So pretty much show me the lifestyle for any of the women in this group is really terrible, as far as they have to do everything. They have to feed these men, service them at any time of the day. I mean, there is no time, nothing that is theirs. Their bodies aren't theirs. They just are there to serve. And at 20 years old, she was actually the oldest one out of all of them. And in fact, after being there for 6 years, she knew she was on limited time as far as how long they would keep her. Just because, again, she was considered getting old, and, there were younger girls to be had. And these people killed for no reason. I mean, it wouldn't take anything. She had witnessed many young women over the years, for whatever reason, not be able to cut it, and they would throw them in the river, push them off a cliff, just kill them outright, so that they could bring somebody else into the space that would be better. So she knew, in fact, that she probably, wasn't going to be around that much longer. But, after 6 years of abuse, it's an absolute abuse, being a sex slave and every other slave to these people, she had already pretty much had the life taken out of her. Over the years, it just, she lost hope. She lost hope of whatever dreams a 14-year-old girl would have at that point, probably thinking about wanting to have a family, wanting to find a nice guy to settle down with. At this point, that clearly did not seem like that was a possibility. Mm-mm. And she, unfortunately, being used as a sex slave meant she got pregnant a lot. My understanding is that she had 3 live births up until that point, and each one of them was immediately discarded. I mean, there were no children in this group, and they wanted it that way. They weren't interested in family kind of situations. So as soon as a child was born, they were either left out in the cold or thrown in the river or whatever. I mean, it was just, the women knew that was exactly what was going to happen the moment it was born. So she had, up till that point, she had 3 live births and several miscarriages along the way. And at this point, despite, like I said, she's carrying a lot of meat and everything back from this trip, she's very pregnant. I'm going to say at least 8 months along. So, yeah, it's not surprising then that since she's carrying much of the weight over several miles, I believe, back to camp, this triggers her labor with number 4. This one, she apparently had had several miscarriages since the last live birth, and this was actually a surprise that this one lasted this long, that it actually got to the point where it could survive. And that's what made this one a little different as far as, I mean, she felt loss over all of them. I think especially that first one, you know, maybe 15 years old or whatever. I really get that those were I mean, all of it was hard. All of it was traumatic. But having these children literally just killed the moment they're born were huge traumas for her. And every time it happened, it just, you know, was one more, just another straw to break her, really. But there was something about this one, I think, because one, she had so many miscarriages, she thought she'd never have another child, and all of a sudden now there is one, actually making it to full term, that some part of her started to light up a little bit. She started thinking, well, what if there was some way that she could actually keep this one? You know, even though it seemed like impossible, how could that happen? She started entertaining the idea that maybe somehow this one would be able to survive and she could keep it somehow, or run away with it, or do something and actually have a child, which she really apparently always wanted, and had given up hope of ever having. Well, now she has this hope. And so that's what's making this situation a little different. So, I'm being told to let you know that yes, there's snow, and this is part of the world that there's always snow. The only question is only a foot deep or 3 feet deep or more. You know, so I don't know. This may be the summer. It may not be. It's hard to say. I mean, at least there's light. They definitely have they have the sun during the day, so it's not so far north where they're, at least this time of year, where they're not having that. There's sunsets, etc. But there is snow. It's icy, even though there's a river right there next to them. It's absolutely cold as if it was frozen. It is running, but yeah, it's absolutely freezing. So anyway, another one of the women helps her with the birth, and so here's the moment. You know, the child's just born, and she asks the woman what gender it is. It's a boy, but the woman's looking at her like, why are you asking? I mean, she knows what's going to happen. They're about to, kill the child, And then she's like, well, can I hold him? Please, just let me hold him. Let me hold him. This is like totally unusual. The woman's like, what are you talking about? I mean, of course not, And so she gets up, has the child by the leg, and goes out the sheltered flap or whatever, and is heading towards the river. I didn't ask the name of this young woman, so I'm sorry. I'm gonna have to just keep talking to her as the woman. Anyway, she is so emotionally distraught by this at this point. She jumps up. I mean, she just gave birth literally like a minute or two before, and she jumps up and runs after the woman, the other woman that has the baby by the leg, and is running after her, begging, screaming very loudly not to kill it. Please, please give it to me. Please, I'll do anything, whatever. She's running after the woman. The woman's already basically by the river at this point, and she's like, whatever, and throws the child into the river. It tosses, doesn't just drop it right there, throws it into the river. And without hesitation, the woman jumps in after the baby into this freezing water. Freezing. And is doing everything she can. I mean, it's like, it's like stabbing knives. It's that cold. As soon as she is in the water, she's immediately starting to freeze to death, and trying to see the baby. And it's actually very fast moving water. That's what I saw. It was, yeah, taking the baby down the river very quickly, and she was trying to swim after it. And what she hears, well, one, the woman that threw the baby in is basically, in whatever language it is, telling her, "You are crazy. What are," I think she called her some names, actually, like some crazy bitch or something. I don't know, something really, whatever. Not at all empathetic, right? And on top of that, she hears the men that have now noticed what just happened. Do you think anybody's trying to save her? They are laughing at her hysterically. I mean, loud. This is what she's hearing as she's like trying to stay above water and trying to do whatever to get to the baby. It's all about trying to get to that baby and saving the baby. So she is very quickly being pulled down that river and trying to make her way over to the baby, which she does actually get to the baby. It takes her like a minute or something of struggling to finally get over and be able to kind of pull it up out of the water, because it was being submerged. Doing everything she can. And again, the pain, the stabbing pain of that kind of cold. By the time she gets actually on the other side of the river, she's able to finally crawl out of it. She's actually like, we'll say over a mile away at least at this point. I mean, it was a really strong current, and it took a lot of effort just to get to the shore and pull herself out. And pretty much that's all she can do. She's so frozen, is just to get her physical body and the baby's physical body out of the water and lay there. And the baby's blue. I mean, it drowned pretty much immediately as soon as it went under the water. It's definitely dead. And she's finally realizing this now as she looks at him, that he's very cold and does not look like there's any life left in him. And at that point, she is spent and heartbroken and just wants to die anyway. So she's just going to lay there and die. That's it. That's, no other reason to try to get up or keep going. So the next thing they show me is she's laying by a fire. And this is not her people either. She's actually, there's a nice fire. She's actually kind of wrapped up in some furs. And this, a few hours after being by the riverbank, very disoriented, very not sure what's happening, and sitting kind of, it's a small cave, over across the little cave, maybe the size of a room, basically. It's not that big. Yeah, there's a man sitting there on the floor, not really saying much, just kind of sitting there, trying not to look very threatening. And it takes her a little bit, but eventually she is able to speak and ask about the baby, actually, which he reluctantly has to point over towards where the baby's wrapped up in a fur, and he basically tells her, "You didn't make it, so sorry." So this man had found her and just run across her. He had heard, because he was actually living in this cave, unbeknownst to all those people. He actually had lived there for a long time. They had no idea he lived there in a little cave. And he had heard the ruckus, actually, of them yelling and laughing, and ultimately could hear her struggling in the river and made his way down to find her there on the rocks. So that's how he found her. And so anyway, the night goes, however, it took her a while to kind of get her senses, but I mean, the moment he confirmed that the baby was dead, that actually was, she pretty much was to herself, especially that first night. Just, I don't even know if she could cry at this point. She was so beaten down emotionally. And the next day, he encourages her to go actually down with him to the river so that they can actually lay the baby in the water and have a more appropriate burial for him. So she could at least kind of say goodbye or whatever. And it was quiet and, was just done, but it just needed to be done to get that piece cleared. And then they made their way back up to the cave, and she was pretty much really quiet for like at least 3 days, not really talking or whatever. So this guy, pretty much brought her food, brought her water. What clothing she did have on still from the river was pretty shot, so he let her use those furs to kind of cover up and use as, I think they kind of sewed it together enough for it to be kind of like a little outfit for her or something, so she had something to wear. But for the first 3 days there really wasn't much communication, but finally they did start to talk a little bit. So that basically what he's doing there. So now I'm going to give you the background for him. And again, I don't think I got a name for him either. It's just the guy, the man. So he's 34 years old, and he's also, some sort of Native American. He had a pretty typical upbringing in whatever village it was in. But 10 years earlier, he had a calling, if you want to call it that, where despite that he had planned on having a typical life, getting married, having children, all that, whatever, he had this very strong pull to go and follow a spiritual journey that took him into the mountains by himself. And he just knew that that's something he needed to do, to live by himself, to live on the land, and just follow whatever the spiritual call was that he was hearing. That was 10 years earlier. He had lived in a couple different locations, but he had been at this one for quite a while. And this was ultimately where he had lived the longest. And the reason he lived there the longest is that this is where he pretty much had found his main spiritual connection he had been looking for. He felt so strongly pulled to get out there. And basically, at the top of this little mountain that he was living on, at the very top, there was a clearing of tree, the trees were on the outside, so it was open clearing. And at one end of it, there was this humongous boulder, huge boulder. I'm sure it was many, many tons heavy. And what was, I guess, special about it is it seemed to have been cracked down the center. Now, just a little fissure. It wasn't like some massive whatever, but it definitely was cracked. And this is where he would go, mainly at night. Sometimes he might go up during the day, but it was really the main connection that he had with spirit was during the nighttime. After the sunset, he would go up there at least for a few hours to commune with whatever spiritual guidance he could get up there. And over time, eventually, that boulder, especially where the crack was, showed itself to be a portal. At least a one-way portal, because beings would step out of it. And there was one in particular that came to visit him quite a bit. And again, I'm not necessarily going to come up with names for you, but as far as later on, they do tell me that this particular group that comes to him, or this particular being that comes to him, is actually a Pleiadian. And this seems to be his main, if you want to call it a guide or teacher or whatever, that would come visit him at night, not necessarily every night. But he would go up every night just in case they would come through. But the main nights that you could pretty much count on somebody coming through in some way was on the new moon. For whatever reason, that seemed to be the time where it was used the most. So that was pretty much a given. You knew you were going to be visited by somebody anyway on the new moon. So, like I said, I have been told that his main person that would come through and visit with him was Pleiadian, and that was the group that was working directly with him. They're really the ones that had called him to go out into the world and do this crazy alone questing spiritual thing. But the moment that he finally got there and he had this connection and he knew, yes, really, he wasn't crazy. There really was something going on, and he was learning, absolutely. Learning, vibrating up. So many spiritual things were happening. This is what he wanted, what he had gone out there for. And ultimately, what they told me was he had been told, at least towards the end here, and as we get to this point in the story, he had been told that, you know, as he continues to vibrate up in his spiritual teachings and his frequency, that eventually he would be able to go with them. He didn't have to stay at a certain point. Whenever he got to that point, he wouldn't have to stay. And he very much wanted this. I mean, it was tough. It was tough being out there by himself. I mean, he actually had a very strong connection with the animals. I mean, they were literally come up. If he needed food, like a bird would just like land in front of him and present itself. Like volunteer itself. All the animals had this connection with him, so he never really had to worry about food, etc., because it was always provided by, in some way. But this is ultimately, oh my goodness, you know, I can't wait. You know, and he keeps, you know, hearing at least towards the end that yes, he's getting, it's soon, always soon, right? We're not quite there yet, but just soon. Right timing, right? Oh. All of us spiritual people, we know that soon comment. Oh, I hate hearing that word, because soon could mean tomorrow or 10 years from now. So anyway, but he at least was being encouraged that yes, soon. All right. So this kind of leads up to this, why he's there, what he's doing up there, why that particular mountain. And he was aware of those people that had come along. Over the years, a few people would come along, sometimes just walk by, sometimes actually stay for a little while. Only on a rare occasion would he even show himself to people. It was more like if it was necessary for some reason to help them out. But for the most part, he never showed himself to those men. And they sounded crazy. He didn't want anything to do with them and couldn't wait for them to move on, right? So, yeah, he definitely did not want them to know that he was there. Okay. So, during these first few days after she arrives, she asks why he's there. He asks how she came to this circumstance, and you know, for him, I don't think there was any problem sharing his journey. He was pretty open about it. I think she shared at least the basics of what she had been through. Clearly, it was very clear to him how traumatized she had been by everything. Very clear how emotionally guarded she was. I'm getting the words deer in a headlight look all the time, like always on alert. Nightmares at night, absolutely. He heard her constantly. Had to wake her up many times because she was having nightmares. Just post-traumatic stress disorder, absolutely. Very hypervigilant and really difficult for her to just relax. And so he did everything he could to try not to push her in any way or get too close to her, even physically. So he didn't want her to feel, I don't know, any kind of threat. So he did notice at some point that she kept looking at the entranceway, and he reassured her many times along the way that at any point, for any reason, if she wanted to leave, he would not try to stop her. I mean, this was not meant to be a prison situation. Certainly was not here to recreate anything that she had just come from, you know. So really gave her a lot of space. And of course she thought about it. I mean, her thoughts of the value of men at that point were so low that, you know, she was sure that eventually he would, you know, it might be nice now, but yeah, he'll eventually want what every other guy wants. And would she really want to put herself in that situation? And of course, the alternative is to be alone out there in the cold, probably die, you know. So, but she still had that choice. He was not going to keep her there. Well, she did on her own choose to stay, and eventually, you know, started to contribute what she could. But again, he was a totally independent guy, so she didn't have to make anything for him unless she wanted to. You know, there was nothing that she had to do, which was really confusing for her. She did not know how to relate to him, you know, just as an independent person that didn't want something from her. So it was actually fairly awkward. Now, one of the things they're reminding me of is a few weeks before she arrived, or a few weeks, maybe it was just a few weeks. I was thinking a few months, but somewhere in there, shortly before she arrived, the being that had been coming to visit him finally said, "There is somebody coming," which he was excited to hear because it was extremely hard for him to not have any human contact. It was also extremely hard for him to not have a family of some sort because he actually always wanted that. You know, he believed in the love thing and, you know, whatever. Now, just a reminder, of course, this is a twin flame reading. So these two are twin flames. So just to remind people, if you didn't make that connection, yes, these are the two twin flames in question. So, but so he's told a little bit ahead of time that somebody's coming. You know, you're not going to be alone that much longer. And yes, this will be like a life partner, wife. He's so excited about this. So it's another reason why when she shows up in the picture, he's also excited about that. But he's totally clear that she in no way is ready to create that kind of a scenario with him. So, but still, you know, he believes. I mean, he was told that this was the person that was going to be his wife. So, you know, he would have been tolerant anyway, but on top of it, he had this reassurance from spirit. So it just was a really difficult relationship, though. I mean, he didn't push it. It was getting to the point where months had gone by, and he was very attracted to her, by the way, from the very beginning, especially her eyes. And I do think that many souls, or especially twin flame connections, you can actually recognize each other from your eyes. I don't know if we always have the same eyes every time, but I just feel like there's a strong connection when you look in your twin flame's eyes. And yeah, you're probably looking into their soul, which is your soul. If you're a twin flame, they're your other half. Anyway, they actually both had very unique eyes. For the region they lived in, this is not typical. His eyes were very silvery blue, very bright blue, silvery, beautiful. And she had kind of golden hazel eyes. Again, very beautiful and unique. They were not, neither one of them really had people, were typical to what most of the eye colors were in that region. So it wasn't just their colors. I mean, it was just looking in each other's eyes. And so he recognized it immediately when they finally looked at each other and got to a recognition there. Absolutely. This was his person. Not just because he'd been told that, but because he could feel it. He could feel it in those first few moments where they were finally talking to each other, or looking at each other at least, and she felt it too. She did. Very strongly. Problem is, with all that trauma in her life already, it scared her. Everything about him scared her. Because he was so nice. He was so gentle. She actually felt safe around him, which feeling safe means something's wrong, right? Just, she couldn't trust it. And she certainly couldn't open her heart. Not at the level that he could or desired. Did she care about him over time? Yeah. Could she absolutely open her heart and fall in love? No. So anyway, a few months are going by, and she has chosen to stay there, and she has better furs, ultimately. And they're coexisting, and he still has this hope, but he's also realizing how difficult this is. And after this time, she's still not seeming to really budge in any way. It's like not even that she's... The only thing that actually made her a little bit better, but only so much, was eventually, about 3 months later, after they first meet, they hear a ruckus, and they watch through the trees so nobody can see them. That group finally packs up, which means the women packed it up, and they're heading down the river, however far they're going to go. They are no longer in the valley that they are in. And absolutely that helped her feel a lot better. Could see her relax a bit more. The nightmares were starting to fade a little bit anyway, maybe not completely, but she was relaxing a little bit. Which gave him a little bit of hope, but overall it really didn't make the level of difference in her ability to open up as he had hoped. So they exist like this for a while. He still goes up every night. See this? He's already explained to her why he goes up there. She doesn't really go with him. He's offered to take her. She really didn't have any real interest in it, and it's kind of out there for her. She doesn't... I don't know. It's kind of weird, but he's a nice guy, so let him do his weird stuff. So, yeah, he still goes up there every night. And he's told, eventually, he is told by his Pleiadian guide that in a few days' time, there will be a new moon, and he needs to bring her with him on that day. He doesn't really explain why, other than it's important that she come. And so, this is the arrangement. The woman says, okay, I guess. I'll go up with her, with you, whatever. So she goes with him. And what I see, they're both kind of kneeling on the ground, facing the boulder, waiting for, the Pleiadian to come through, which eventually he does. He shows up. And this time, he starts off with, thank you for bringing her, thank you for coming, all this stuff, and says, well, I'm not going to be doing most of the talking tonight. I have brought somebody. And he's basically talking to her at this point. I've brought someone from your galactic family. I guess, the man is connected to the Pleiadian in that way. Well, he's about to bring through a being that is connected to her galactic family. Wow, okay, this is different. So they're showing me that basically the Pleiadian is actually always usually dressed in white and gold, kind of robe kind of things. He kind of steps aside a little bit. It's always bright too, by the way. When he comes through, very light. You can see, see each other, see the surroundings because it's all light when he comes through. So anyway, he steps aside a little bit, and now through the portal comes this much bigger, massive gold and red light being. So you got the Pleiadian here that's maybe closer to human size, and then this humongous red light being comes through. And what I was told was it actually represented the Draco, a positive Draco group, because there's definitely a lot of negative ones out there. This one represented the good guys, whatever. And so, would she like totally blown away by all this anyway? Obviously, she wasn't even believing anything was going to really happen when she came up there. And now there's this huge being basically saying you are of our lineage and you are our child, basically, and we've actually come to take you back. Which shocks, well, both of the man and the woman, but well, the man's like, what? He didn't really say a whole lot during this exchange, but he's thinking, wait. I mean, he's kind of looking at the Pleiadian guy like, hold on now. This is supposed to be my wife. What? Huh? What? But anyway, the red being is talking to her and basically is able to convey that she's been extremely traumatized in this life. And actually, as he's talking to her and she's starting to glow a little bit of that red color, you could actually see across her chest 3 major scratch marks that are in the gold color. So it's a light golden color scratch marks across her chest that what I was told was that actually represented every one of the first 3 children that she gave birth to. Even though she went through all sorts of bad things, those were the most traumatizing for her. So every time she gave birth to one that was alive and it was killed, it left a humongous emotional, mental, whatever scar across her heart. And this was why she could not, no matter how much she wanted to actually, open her heart to him. It was just too much damage that was never going to be overcome by how much he loved her, how much time went by. It wasn't going to be able to make the difference. So she needed to go with that being back to her family so that she could be healed. And this was hard for both of them. Even though she wasn't, in love with him, whatever, she absolutely cared about him and realized, they had pretty much decided this was just going to be, they were going to live together. I mean, that was going to be their future. And here, all of a sudden now, she's being told this, which she's being given the choice, actually. I mean, they're not going to drag her through that portal if she doesn't want to go. But when she looks at the guy, she basically says, I'm sorry. I can't give you what you deserve, what you need. I wanted to be able to give that to you. I wanted to have that for myself, but I'm too broken. And I think this is what I need to do. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. And by the end, she gets up. And she walks towards that portal. And all he can do is, he's there on the ground kneeling and is watching what he thought was going to be the love of his life. And he did love her even then. So this was still like not even future basis. He loved her now. She turned around once to look at him. And then she walked through that portal into that red gold light. It was gone. So, this was extremely hard for him. He felt extremely betrayed. Some by her, but also, especially by the Pleiadian group. He felt like they lied to him. They said she was the one. They spelled it out. They did not leave any room for maybe he misunderstood. No, they said she was the one. And now she's gone? Like forever? What? And at that point, the Pleiadian guy really couldn't give him anything that gave him any comfort in that. And he went down that mountain extremely angry, betrayed, questioning his faith. 10 years of commitment to this, and now he felt absolutely betrayed. So for 3 months, he stayed in that cave. At least, he might have gone out a little bit to gather food or something, but for the most part, he did not go back up to the top of that mountain. He didn't care if they were coming to meet him there. How could he trust them anymore? How could he trust anything that he was being told? Well, part of him hoped that, maybe she would show up at the door again. Maybe she decided to come back. But every day that went by where she wasn't there just ripped out his heart a little bit more. So he went through a really tough process of his faith. Will he ever actually meet somebody that could ever be that? Well, not her, but even, he just questioned everything. Like anything in his life was going to work out at all the way he wanted. After several months, though, he did start to go back up there, kind of reluctantly being open to hearing the teachings some more. And of course, they never could give him any, explanation for why things went the way they did. It just went the way they did, and not everything. In fact, most things are not set in stone, even though it looks like things might happen a certain way. There's free will involved. That was a big thing. Always free will that could, make things a little different. And so this is how it went. But over time, again, this is ultimately going to take about a year from the moment that she arrived in his life to about a year later, where he finally makes a choice. He's, for this whole year, been struggling with his emotions, been trying to hold on to hope that they said maybe she'll come back. She'll come back. She'll come back through that portal. It'll happen. Back and forth, up and down. Just emotions everywhere, to the point where he, almost a year later, felt like he had to make a choice. Should he stay or should he go? Should he continue this path, this lonely existence, with no guarantees of how it's going to go, that it would be any better? Or should he get off of this track and go on and try to find something else to do with his life? Well, in the first version, the original version, he walks away. He walks away, even though the Pleiadian is still coming and, offering to continue to be a support and guide, whatever. He gives up. And he wants a different life, whatever that may be. And ultimately, what I'm told is, it's not a very good life. He's pretty much, if you want to say, scarred by that for life. That's his scar. And, he loses his faith in that lifetime. Absolutely. And that's how it ends. These two twin flames do not even end up in the same dimension, apparently. So, that's how it goes. So when I see a timeline and I look at the highlights and understand what I need to understand from it, that's when I ask my guides to show me where would be the best place to intervene to change something a little bit in the timeline so that it would have a higher level outcome, a higher vibrational outcome. And again, I was shown this ahead of time and I will share this, but I have not put this into place yet. And we will do that by the end of this video so that this timeline that we just talked about will be altered forever. And the vibration between twin flames, these particular twin flames, as well as, because we are actually really one collective at this point, everybody will get the vibrational uplift from it. And they ultimately show me in that whole year's time, the best place to intervene is actually at the very end. So all that happens, as we talked about, she's decided to go through that portal. He's gone through all of his emotional upheaval for, up until the end of that year. And he's at that moment where he's having to make the choice. He's either going to have to commit or recommit that he is going to continue with his spiritual journey as it is. Nothing's changed from the year earlier as far as he's still out there alone. He's still learning. He still keeps being told soon. In fact, his vibration did drop actually and all of that. So soon wasn't maybe as soon as it was before, but soon, he could go with the Pleiadian guide somewhere. So really he's back to where he started from after a very, very tough year. Traumatic. That was traumatic for him. He may not have had the physical trauma that she did, but on a spiritual, mental, emotional level, he absolutely was traumatized by all of that. And in the second version, in the new version, it's really a choice. It's nothing really huge, some big event that needs to happen. He just needs to make the other choice, which is to stay. That he went out there for a reason. And basically what he learned that year, maybe more than anything else, was that it doesn't always look, in fact, it rarely looks exactly like the way we think it's going to go. And that this may still be the best place for him. Because he's not being, other than wanting to get out of it and try something else, he's not being guided to, and he just, it's a choice. It's purely a choice. And this time he chooses to stay. That's all he has to do. Stay and let go of a lot of the anger and betrayal. And he's able to do that. By this point, when he's making this decision, he's actually gotten to a certain place of acceptance of everything that happened the year before, of, not feeling actually any resentment towards anybody anymore. So that's not in the space either. So his vibration is certainly high enough for whatever he needs to do. He really just needs to, and he does, choose to stick with it. Choose the old life and have faith, that somehow things will change. He will find whatever it is that his true calling, his true life, true purpose. And yes, maybe even there is a wife out there somewhere for him that will eventually show herself. There's no guarantees, though. He's not making this choice with any guarantees that any of that stuff will happen. But he recommits to it. And that's it. That's all that changes. So he's going about his business, the typical daily routine as it's been forever. And he's going up to the same new moon. It's the same month at this point. It's about a year from that other new moon. And he goes up there and he's kneeling as he usually does, and he's waiting for the Pleiadian guy to come through. So he's just sitting there, not really expecting much. At this point, he doesn't expect anything. He's been so kind of worn down to just whatever happens. Whatever happens, I'm just going to go with it. So he's got his eyes closed and he's waiting. And now he still has his eyes closed, but he's starting to see color, which is the light starting to come through the stone. And he sees the gold. It always starts with the gold. He still has his eyes closed. Now this time, through his eyelids, he can see a red color. Okay, now he hasn't seen the red color since I came and took her. So this gets his attention. Opens his eyes. And there she is, glowing, absolutely glowing, as she walks out of that red gold light. Okay, this is a shock. At this point, he had pretty much given up that there was any hope of her coming back. And he really is in shock. I don't know, it's more like, okay, what does this mean? He's a little, actually, he's not overjoyed at this point, because he's already kind of gotten to the point of really not necessarily believing anything that he had dreamed of would ever come true. So if she's coming back, it's probably not anything, like that. And she's just glowing. She really is vibrating so high and walking barefoot through that portal, radiating that red gold light, and then walks up to him. And he gets up off his knees at least, and she's still not really physically in the same form that he is. She's definitely in that higher vibration. And as she's standing there, you can kind of see the other lights behind her as the Pleiadian guy now comes through, and that gigantic red beam comes through as well. Again, he hasn't seen that one for a long time either. So, but he's just staring at her. Kind of living this in the moment, because this is actually an active part of the rewrite right now. I'm spelling it out here, because I'm talking it out. I'm putting it out there into the universe right now. So this is what he's seeing. And she actually looks very different. I mean, she looks the same, but what's this look of, dare he say, happiness on her face? I mean, he hasn't ever seen her with that kind of emotion before. And if he thought she was beautiful before, okay, this is a whole nother level of beauty, right? And instead of these dark claw marks, or well, they weren't dark, they were light, but anyway, the claw marks are gone. And now her heart area is just like glowing the gold color. Basically, she came back. Oh, she was healed all right. Wherever she went, she was healed. My understanding is that was the only way that she was going to be able to be healed enough to be with him. That his healing, actually, he was healed too in that year by going through what he did and coming out the other side. It actually lifted his vibration to a whole nother level. Going through that trauma of the betrayals and whatever other things he was going through, that actually lifted his energy up high enough to actually be at the same level she is. So, in a way, they kind of started at this level and went like this, but ultimately, ended up at the same vibration. And now he has another choice to make. They both do, I guess. They actually have the option. They both have the option to go back through that portal. He can go now. And yes, they could even be together in some way on the other side of that portal. Or they could also choose, if they wanted that, to still be together, to stay there and exist together there and create whatever kind of life they wanted there. And both options are tempting, especially for him. He hasn't been on the other side. He really wants to know what that's like. But what he wants more is a family, is a wife, kids. And if she's willing to stay there in that form and create that with him, then that's ultimately what they choose. To stay in human form, at a higher frequency though, and live out an amazing life right here on this planet, which also lifts the vibration on the planet by choosing that as well. So that's what they choose. And they go back to that cave, and because they're both vibrating higher at this point, the connection, well, it's beyond words. And they both, in that lifetime, at least in the beginning, both wanted to have children. This is why those were so hard for her. They have a little girl, beautiful little girl. And that's their family. They continue to live in that cave, but I think also maybe expand out a little bit, but they need to stay close to that mountain because, every night, at least with weather permitting anyway, they're up there at the top of that mountain, communing with the Pleiadians, with the Draco, and whatever other group comes through. In fact, I think the little girl has another group. They're blue. I just saw them. I haven't seen this part. Or at least the light that comes through when they come through is blue. Might be the Syrians. Not sure about that, but could be. So that's another group because they're connected to their daughter. Interesting. And so they continue with their spiritual expansion. In my understanding, they actually are able to go through that portal. Come and go actually back and forth. But eventually, when they choose, they all three go through that portal. When the girl is an adult, they choose to do that, all three of them, to go through as a family and experience whatever's on the other side for them. I'm getting a lot of energy, so I'm going to actually put this in place right now because I believe it's ready. So that's changing right now. That original timeline is shifting at the point where he decides to recommit and stay, continue his spiritual journey. All of that is shifting. All timelines since then. So we're talking about 1,500 years worth of timelines, not just for them, but for all of us. And there's been a lot of timelines in that period of time where these twin flames have been trying to work it out. So that's shifting now. And that's sending a wave out across the planet right now. Out into space and time, actually. Another big boost for the twin flames right now as they've experienced this another lift. Healing. Deep level healing. Yeah, I'm feeling that. I want to talk, but there's a lot of energy coming in right now, so hold on a second. still coming in, but I'm going to try to talk. The big takeaway from this rewrite was about going through a healing process for both of them. That's a part of lifting our vibrations, actually. If we want a heavenly. Interesting. I was trying to say happily ever after. A heavenly ever after sounds pretty cool too. Wow. Okay. We have to deal with the deepest wounds that we have, because those are dead weight, and they keep us from really stepping powerfully, not only with our connections with our twin flames, our divine masculine and divine feminines, but it keeps us from our highest level life. Dreams come true on the other side of releasing, having the courage, and it takes courage, absolutely. Both of them had courage in this. Both of them showed courage. And when I looked up, it was 1 hour, 11 minutes, and 11 seconds. Talk about a new beginning, right? A new beginning. That's what this new moon is bringing us. January 24th, 2020. New moon is bringing this energy to us, this ability to move forward and heal at a whole nother level. Letting go of a lot of those really, really old, deep scars. And they're in all of our bodies, not just our physical body, mental, emotional, spiritual. I know there's a whole bunch of them that I don't even know. And they need to be cleared, they need to be let go of. However you need to heal it. If you need to work with your spiritual group, reach out to them if you know who they are, or even if you don't, ask them to show themselves. They are probably the ones that know best what works for your lineage and how to heal whatever needs to be healed there. So that's it. It's time to release. Be willing to look at the wounds, yes. Be willing to heal, but it's also about, for him, at the end, he just had to let go of trying to control how it was going to go. And keep some faith there that things were ultimately going to bring him to a better scenario at some point. He didn't know how. He had to commit without knowing. That is the faith piece. Without knowing where things are going to go. Just believing at some point it's going to finally turn his way. It's going to finally turn your way. And this new moon may actually be the trigger point for many of us to have our twin flames come to us now, because they have healed and we have healed and gotten ourselves to a high enough frequency that we can finally come together in the physical. And if you're already with your twin flame, well, this will bring you together at an even higher level. So that's it. This is what's taken us through this new moon. Exciting times. If you enjoyed this, please like, share, and subscribe. Please go to my website at rewritingtheverse.com, and you can find plenty of other videos that are similar to this one and find out more about the verse. So until next time, my friends, peace and love. Oh, enjoy. Bye-bye.